All right, 2 minutes after, I think I'll get started, just kicking off our presentation for today. And I'm going to just quickly share my screen and just let you know a little bit about the Long Island Sound Coastal Watershed Network. My name is Holly Drinketh. I work for the Nature Conservancy in Connecticut as Director of River and Estuary Conservation. And I also participate on the Long Island Sound Study as the Connecticut co-chair for the Citizens Advisory Committee. And my co-chair from New York is also speaking today. So you're getting a heavy dose of the Citizens Advisory Committee today. You can see here that our objectives for our network, which is now in its 4th year, are to work with other groups and bring communities and groups and individuals together to really enhance the number and increase the number of local clean water projects that are focused in on reducing nitrogen pollution, bacteria and pathogen pollution, as well as marine debris pollution. Today, we'll be concentrating a little bit on the nitrogen pollution aspects, and we're excited to be presenting speakers who are talking about how we can move the science and efforts through the Long Island Sound Study that we've identified and get those to policy at the state and sub-state level. So that will be great. And I'll start off by saying today we're going to spend a little time thinking about the goals of the revised Long Island Sound Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan. This is a 10-year plan that is overseen by Long Island Sound Study for both New York and Connecticut, as well as the full watershed of the Long Island Sound, which extends up into Vermont, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. So what the focus of this effort is today is for us to talk a little bit about those changes to the plan and the 10-year plan as it focuses on water quality and the issues identified for healthy watersheds and the embayments of Long Island Sound. And I'm going to pass it over to Peter Linderoth to talk a little bit about the details of that.
Nice. Thank you, Holly. Appreciate it. Thanks for the introduction. Great to see so many familiar faces or name blocks, however you want to call it, on Zoom, and also plenty of new names joining. Thanks for joining us today. So I'm going to give a quick setup on the CCMP goal, one of 4 goals in the CCMP that Holly was just referencing, specifically the clean waters and healthy watersheds. I happen to be on this writing team. I know Holly is as well. There's others too. I saw Chris from DEC. I mean, Chris, you could also jump in and give this part of the talk, I'm sure. But it really has been just a quick personal reflection and professional.
Peter, could you please change to your showing up as your presenter mode? Is that possible to change display settings?
Right, hold on.
Sorry, there.
That's okay. Give me a sec. How about we do it this way? Better?
Yes.
Okay, good. That can always be a little tricky on the spot, Holly. Thanks so much, though. All right. I've learned over the years. So where was I? Oh, yeah. Professional reflection has been a lot of fun working with that writing team. We've all spent a lot of time working on this goal and specifically the objectives and some of the measurables within. I mean, it's so important, right? All 4 are, don't get me wrong. The speakers today will largely be speaking to some of the topics that are relevant to this goal, so we wanted to highlight it. If you're not familiar, there's a humpback whale going after a bunker off the coast of New Rochelle in Westchester, so really close to where my Larchmont Save the Sound office is, right out actually the back here. And it's just remarkable to see whales in Long Island Sound. The waters have definitely cleaned up tremendously from the 80s and prior. And we just want to keep protecting and restoring the waters to see more marine mammals and other animals we want to see, and wildlife across the board that we want to see in the Sound. And when we talk about the watershed, just a reminder, I mean, Long Island Sound, an urban sea and urban estuary that has a remarkably large watershed that extends technically all the way up to Canada. You'll see various watershed SNPs. This is just the overall watershed from the Long Island Sound study. So objective one in this goal is nutrients, right? And nutrients is a very friendly way, or not friendly, but an easy way to kind of encompass what, in a lot of ways, we're really talking about, which is nitrogen, primarily in the sound, and phosphorus too in the watershed. And nutrients in general are really important. I mean, hey, they're fun to analyze. This is one of our lab techs in Save the Sounds lab, running samples, water samples from the sound for nutrients. And they're also really essential building blocks of life, right?
All right, yeah, wait, I just want to make an announcement. Please mute yourself. We can hear you, and we're not hearing Peter. So please mute yourself, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adrian. Always got my back there. I appreciate it. So, fun to analyze in our lab, of course, we have a good time doing it, but we need nitrogen, phosphorus, and other nutrients in the sound. It's excess nitrogen, especially in Long Island Sound, that can cause eutrophic conditions. Too much nitrogen in the system leads to low oxygen levels, leads to really intense, harmful algal blooms like this one that our team documented in Rye, where entire harbors look like there's green clouds of phytoplankton, algae floating in them. Obviously very detrimental to Long Island Sound, to people, to wildlife. So too much nitrogen is a bad thing. And we don't really have to look any further than ourselves when we talk about this type of pollution. It comes from wastewater, fertilizer, wastewater from treatment plants, but also from cesspools and septic, fertilizer, impervious coverage, really nitrogen-rich stormwater runoff coming off our roads and roofs, and et cetera. So, it's obviously going to stay in the CCMP for this go-around and remains an objective in the Clean Water, Healthy Watersheds section. And I'm not going to read all of this by any means, but I really do encourage people, everyone on this webinar, if you haven't yet, to go to the Long Island Sound Study CCMP webpage, read the background for this particular section, read the whole thing if you're up for it, to get all the information. So I'm not going to read this, but the way it works is goal, objective statement, measure of success, and then it gets more granular from there too. There's action items and such that help guide resources and management actions to hit these measures of success. So reducing nutrients across the watershed to protect and restore Long Island Sound. I mean, that's really straightforward. Some of the measures of success for this particular CCMP are implementation of the Suffolk and Nassau County 9-element watershed plans. That's to reduce nitrogen making its way into North Shore Long Island embayments, our bays and harbors. And then in Connecticut, there's a second generation nitrogen strategy that's looking at modeling nitrogen loads in Connecticut bays and harbors, which, both of those, as they work towards a goal or towards a completion, will help identify paths for further nitrogen reduction. And it's not just those two plans. There's other areas that aren't covered, and those also need to be addressed, New York City waters, et cetera. Objective 2, and these aren't necessarily ranked in priority, is watershed health. And here's another look at the watershed, although it's much tighter this time, isn't it? So instead of the image I showed before, this isn't related to the actual objective, so please don't take it that way. But what we're looking at here with this kaleidoscope are, over 100 coastal watersheds that impact the bays and harbors of Long Island Sound, obviously a focus area. So we talk watershed, we could be talking up Massachusetts, Vermont, included in the watershed, or we could start talking about what these are, which are the USGS, not to get too technical, HUC 12 watersheds. It's a delineation of watersheds along the coastal boundaries. Activities in these kind of closer to Long Island Sound waters often have a higher impact on Long Island Sound itself, be it pollution or restoration efforts. And here, there's no doubt that we need to improve the watershed to improve ecosystem health. And the measure of success is an additional 5,000 acres of water. I hope Paul is on this call, Paul Stacy. It's really important that we continue to protect acres of watershed land, beyond not just that. This isn't defined as the coastal boundary by Long Island Sound Study. These are the coastal watersheds, but beyond the coastal boundary, continuing to try to preserve forests and woodlands for what they are too, not just open space and parkland, which can sometimes look like, hey, that's great. It's not developed or urbanized per se. Really protecting our watershed, protecting the natural ecosystem services that woodlands and forests give us, and also establishing and maintaining a 100-foot or wider riparian or river buffer across 75% of the waterways in 90% of the subbasins. So, in short, we really need to protect our rivers and the lands right around them, the buffers, really important for ecological health of those rivers, which then subsequently flow into Long Island Sound. I'd really encourage people, if they're interested, taking a look at this tool that was issued by CLEAR, Connecticut's Changing Landscape. Sorry, Adrian, I didn't see one for Long Island yet, but it probably exists. You don't need to jump in and correct me. You could drop it in the chat. But looking at how land use has changed in Connecticut, there's some really interesting tools in here. One's like a magnifying glass where you can go in. I mean, it's really apparent that we need to start getting smart about land use and land conversion and keeping our woodlands and forests intact. Last but not least are pathogens, and obviously these aren't pathogens on the screen. These are people enjoying Glen Island Park in New Rochelle. But pathogens in the water are what make people sick when they go swimming. And it's also something that closes down, pathogens in the water closes down shellfish, commercial usage of Long Island Sound. So an important objective. And then, so the objective statement here is reducing pathogens and increasing monitoring to understand, sources and other places where they might be coming from. And measures of success are stormwater infrastructure improvements, replacing cesspools and septic tanks where possible in Connecticut, definitely on Long Island, hence the cesspool reference. And achieving, this is kind of great, I left a link in here, achieving a 5-year rolling average of 80% of our Long Island Sound beaches, getting a grade of B- or better based on the Sound Health Explorer beach grades. Why is that great? Why did I say that? Because Save a Sound puts those out. But they're put together with a scientific method that was developed with stakeholders, excuse me. And I'd encourage you to dig deeper into that and provide some comments on it too. And definitely increasing our understanding of where these pathogens are coming from through additional water quality monitoring. I'm going to stop sharing. We've got some highlight speakers that you're all here to hear from today. Just going to quickly introduce them. And then just turn it over so you can all take your talks away. First, I'm going to do all three, and then I'll turn it to you, Nancy, okay? So first up, we're going to have Nancy Seligson. Many of you know Nancy from the Citizens Advisory Committee, like Holly said, but she's here also representing the Westchester Coalition for Clean Water as a co-chair of that coalition. Thank you for being here, Nancy. Then we're going to have Alicia Charmant, who's the executive director of the Rivers Alliance of Connecticut. Thank you, Alicia. And then last but not least, not really technically cleanup because she's batting third, but anchoring it for us is Adrian Esposito, executive director of Citizens Campaign for the Environment. Adrian, always a pleasure to have you. Look forward to hearing your talk as well. So with that, Nancy, please take it away.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Hello to everyone. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. As Peter mentioned, I am the CAC co-chair, the New York co-chair for the Citizens Advisory Committee of the Long Island Sound Study. I'm very lucky to get to work with a whole bunch of you, and Holly is the Connecticut co-chair. But I'm going to be talking about the Westchester Coalition for Clean Water, which is a new coalition that formed before it was officially announced. It's been in meeting for a few years, but it was just formally announced this past summer. And the problem that we're addressing is water quality pretty openly. And that is because in Westchester County, our sewage systems are not working as well as they should be. Sewage overflows and leaks damage Westchester County's rivers, streams, harbors, Long Island Sound, and the Hudson River. And this results in all the terrible things that Peter mentioned as well: closed beaches, closed shellfish beds, untreated sewage leaking into roads, playgrounds, parks, even people's basements, and also into those streams and creeks and Long Island Sound and the Hudson River. And one of the reasons we are focusing on that we think can be improved, and what we think is causing some of this bad water quality, is the complicated sewer systems in Westchester County. Westchester County owns and operates 7 wastewater treatment plants in the county and has approximately 194 miles of trunk lines that connect the municipally owned sewer systems to the treatment plants. We've got 6 cities, 9 towns, and 19 villages that are each responsible for their own maintenance and improvement of their own sewer systems, and that's mostly the lateral lines that connect to the trunk lines. So the county and the municipal sewage collection pipes and pumps need repair and improvement. They haven't been the #1 sexy issue to be repaired and maintained over time. You know, as we all know, sewer pipes are underground. I used to say if they were above ground, they'd be in a lot better shape than they are now. And these broken and disconnected sewer lines allow the sewage to leak out into the groundwater, and also excess groundwater and stormwater to enter those lines, and that's called inflow and infiltration. This causes sanitary sewer overflows at the sewage treatment plants and in the pipe areas, and discharge of inadequately treated sewage, and that ends up in Long Island Sound and the Hudson River. So the risks and problems have been and will increase due to rising sea levels, the frequency of really intense rainstorms, hurricanes, and flooding. Municipalities are really upset about flooding at this time because they're all having a difficult time in Westchester County handling flooding. We don't think that people understand that some of those flood waters actually include untreated sewage. But the municipalities, you know, have tax caps, they have constrained funding restrictions, they have staffing level issues and capabilities, and of course, they have competing infrastructure needs. So one of the other things that's bad about all of this is that the increase in groundwater or stormwater that reaches the county sewage treatment plants increases operating costs, energy use, and greenhouse gas emissions. So it's all bad. We have been involved, we being Westchester Coalition for Clean Water, as a bunch of nonprofits and organizations that have been interested in clean water in Westchester County for a long time. And they include Riverkeeper, the Center for Urban River at BZAC, Federated Conservationists of Westchester County, Save the Sound, and the Nature Conservancy. 4 municipalities are involved. They're New Rochelle, the town of Mamaroneck, of which I was the supervisor for 10 years, the village of Larchmont, and the village of Pelham Manor, because they have offered to be a model project or program for sewer consolidation in the county. And because Lorraine Walsh is also involved, she's the former mayor of the village of Larchmont. We now have Groundwork Hudson Valley, Bronx River Alliance, Yonkers Paddling and Rowing Club are all involved in the coalition now. And we decided to form a formal organization to better organize and communicate and advocate for restoring clean water in Westchester's waterways for all community members now and into the future. Some of the solutions that we'd like to see take effect as soon as possible and that we are calling for is a real new construct for sewage treatment in the county. And that's to have the county take a leadership role in working with the municipalities to develop strategies and plans to access the historic funding levels that are available right now and to prioritize the areas that are in most need of repair and improvement. We can improve the governance of the sewers by looking at sewer consolidation. And that's one of the major, that's what really brought us together. That sewer consolidation is something that's been considered for a very long time in Westchester County. The current county executive, George Latimer, said that he was very interested in it when he came on board 4 years ago. No, sorry. It's been his second term. So we would like to see consolidation. We think that it would be a great benefit to water quality and a benefit economically and to governance for all of the sewer system. So we're asking the county to really create an actionable strategy to rapidly assess and prioritize the aging and leaking pipes, develop a project cost estimate for all of the needs throughout the county, and a funding strategy that will help local resources, meaning the municipalities, really access state and federal funding that's available. And we'd like to see this happen really within the next 5 years. So what do we do, the Westchester Coalition for Clean Water? Well, we meet with the county and we tell them that we'd like to see this happen. We meet with the county executive, the deputy county executive, legislators and the county board. We reach out to municipal leaders throughout the county and let them know that we're really pushing for this, that we think it would be beneficial for them. We are looking for their support. The county has hired a consultant to do some analysis of creating a consolidation, and they're first looking at the 4 municipalities I mentioned before. And we are reviewing the consultant's materials and making suggestions for that. And we're also speaking with state legislators because we need to have state enabling legislation to allow for consolidation in Westchester County. It is a big lift, there's no question about it, but it is a big problem. And here in 2024, there's no reason that we should be having such poor water quality in Westchester County and such a sewer system that isn't working up to what it should be doing. So how does this increase local efforts and relate to the CCMP goals? Well, local efforts, it's easy to see because the municipalities themselves will have to be involved. And we need to do a public communication effort to let the public understand what's really happening with the sewer systems and why their beaches are closed and why that water is not so great that's backing up into their basement or on their streets and why flooding is a big problem. So we are looking to include the local municipalities, as I mentioned, and we're looking to create funding incentives for the local elected leaders to allow them to understand that this could bring dollars into their municipality as well as improve their infrastructure. And how does this relate to the CCMP? Well, goal 1 is clean waters and healthy watersheds, and to restore and maintain water quality in Long Island Sound and its watershed. We're talking about water quality. In pathogens, objective 3, the objective statement is to reduce pathogens and increase monitoring to protect water quality and human health. And one of the measures of success is through stormwater and wastewater infrastructure improvement projects. That's exactly what this is. And one of the actions is to evaluate and improve wastewater and stormwater infrastructure. So this is a big wastewater infrastructure improvement program that is housed within Westchester Coalition for Clean Water. You see our new logo up there. And we're looking to work with all interested parties who want to see clean water in Westchester and look at many different options for it, but we're focusing on consolidation of sewers first. Thanks. And everyone should comment on the CCMP if they have the chance. We really appreciate that.
Thank you, Nancy. And thank you to anyone who put questions in the chat. We are going to save those for the end.
Thank you. I just said the same thing, but I was muted. Look at me. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Look at us on the same page.
Yes, see Melissa's chat, and please hold questions till the end. Next up, we have Alicia Charmit from Rivers Alliance of Connecticut. Take it away, Alicia, please.
Great. Thanks, Peter. And Melissa, I think are you the one sharing my
Yep, pulling it up.
presentation? Okay. So as she's pulling that up, if you could remember 2 things from anything I have to say today, one of them is that riparian buffers are the most effective and efficient way to protect or improve water quality. And the second thing is that Connecticut is the only state in New England that does not have setbacks or specific protections for riparian buffers. It does not exist in our statutory or regulatory framework. Again, I'm Alicia Charmit. I'm the Executive Director of Rivers Alliance of Connecticut. We work on policy, advocacy, and education on all water issues, groundwater, surface water, ponds, lakes, everything. So our name is a little bit of a misnomer. We're going to start out with the basics. So Melissa, next slide, please.
Sorry, working on it.
Is it anybody else seeing those rectangles, or is that just me?
Yes, that is showing up here as well.
Huh. That's very strange. Well, we can get the gist of it here. And again, I know there are so many people who are already experts on this, but I start everything out at a basic level, and I don't make assumption that everyone knows everything. So what is a riparian buffer? So this is a great image. You have your stream channel in the middle. You have your riparian area on either side of it, which is, again, the area on the side of a surface water. And again, riparian areas don't just apply to rivers and streams. It applies to our lakes and our ponds. And then you have your uplands. Now, the riparian buffer is the vegetated area within the riparian area. And what it does is it acts as a buffer from the upland area to the surface water. So it helps slow, actually, we'll go to the next slide and talk a little bit about everything riparian buffers do. So it helps with water filtration, because it slows that water down coming downhill from the upland area. It helps that water to infiltrate into soils, which helps with groundwater recharge. It helps clean that water that's coming from the upland areas. It acts as habitat for wildlife, so it helps with biodiversity. They are wildlife corridors, not just for terrestrial species, but also for migratory birds. They're flyway corridors as well. They shade our streams. All over the Northeast, we're starting to lose that high quality cold water habitat important to so many species. They act as carbon sequestration because they are vegetated or forested. Also, riparian buffers, actually, they have an environmental justice component. Our urban areas and a lot of our environmental justice communities are at the confluence and the base of our watersheds, right? So they're getting everything that's coming down throughout the watershed. And we spend millions of dollars improving water quality through structural improvements and other things in our urban areas. But if we continue to lose ecosystem services in the upland areas, we're going to continue sending water down and undermining all of those investments we're putting into improving water quality in our urban areas and our environmental justice communities. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, I already mentioned this. This is something that WestCog put together, which is the Western Connecticut Council of Governments. They've got a great report called The Case for Riparian Corridor Protections. This is taken from that report. And I know we have a lot of New York folks here, and I apologize, I don't have anything on New York here, but so you can see that for established buffer zones or minimum setbacks, Connecticut doesn't have any. You can see that the rest of the New England states do in varying degrees. And this is something that really has to change, especially if we are going to meet the goals that I'm really excited about in the new CCMP, looking up watershed and protecting water quality. And with that, identifying riparian buffers is a very, very essential element of making that happen. Next slide, please. So it's also important to note that what we do for every land use application, there is a potential of making the impacts of stormwater runoff that impact water quality much worse. There's often an increase in impervious surface. There's often a loss of forest or open space. And again, pair that with a lack of protections for riparian and vegetated buffers, and you have a recipe for increased water quality issues and also increased flooding issues. Next slide, please. And these are some of the maps that were referenced earlier. So this shows the increase in impervious surface from 1985 to 2015 in Connecticut. The darker the color, the more impervious surface change increase. And as you can see, a lot of those darker areas are in our major watersheds, particularly along the Connecticut River. Next slide, please. And this shows a loss of forest and open space. So again, the darker the color, the more forest and open space loss. And again, you see a lot of those darker colors along our major waterways. Next slide, please. So, and getting back to this, this really is a great illustration of how efficient and cost-effective riparian buffers are. This is taken from the Bantam Lake watershed-based plan, the pollutant load reduction optimization analysis, particularly for phosphorus, because Bantam Lake, which by the way, for a lot of you New York folks, and maybe some of you Connecticut folks that aren't familiar with the area, but it is it's a lake in the northwest corner of Connecticut. It is well used for recreation, has a lot of homes on it. It's a beautiful lake, but unfortunately it has harmful algal bloom issues. So this watershed-based plan was developed to help nip some of that in the bud. And this shows, you can see your structural BMPs to reduce phosphorus are really expensive. We're talking in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if you look at the riparian buffer improvement BMP, which is the green cell there, second to last, by far the cheapest way to reduce nutrients per cost. And so this is something that a very good reason why we need to be using this. We can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars fixing a problem, or we can change some policy and essentially get these services for free. Next slide, please.
Sure thing, and I'll give you just like a 2-3 minute warning.
Sure, I'm almost done actually, I think.
Awesome.
Right. All right. Okay, so common sense solutions. First of all, I'm going to stress I'm very excited that the CCMP is looking up the watershed and has establishment of riparian buffers as a solution for healthier waters and a healthier Long Island Sound. So I encourage everyone to be encouraging of that in your comments. Also, we need consistent protection for riparian buffers, and we need to incorporate them into our statutory and regulatory framework. And we also have to broaden our climate solution focus. Too often when we're focusing on climate change, we're focusing on greenhouse gas reductions, which is absolutely positively important. However, we need to start looking at maintaining all of our ecosystem services throughout our watershed, not only to decrease the decline in water quality, but also it's going to help with flooding. Next slide, please. What you can do in your own backyard, right? We don't have to wait for all of this to change to make changes in our community. So if you live on our water body, establish a vegetated buffer along the banks. And I will put links in the chat to the resources I have put here. Follow your best management practices for fertilizer, and also reduce impervious surface on your property. And again, I'll put some of these resources and guidances in the chat after I'm done talking. Next slide. Here is my contact information. Please reach out if you have any questions. I will now hand it off to the next person. Didn't even have to give me the 1 minute warning.
Look at that. It's a nice soft landing. Thank you. Thank you, Alicia. And I have been seeing, and we've all been seeing questions in the chat, so please keep those coming. But moving along, I'd like to introduce can I do that? The Adrian Esposito, the executive director at Citizens Campaign for the Environment Adrian, please take us home with the presentations.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to be very quick. This is an issue that if you live in Suffolk County, you have to vote on. And if you don't live in Suffolk County, the outcome of the vote will still impact you because it's going to impact Long Island Sound. Next slide. What we're talking about here is Proposition 2. Let me explain. You all know by now, I hope, if you live on Long Island, you live on top of your drinking water, 100%. And we still get some people tell us, no, my drinking water comes from New York City. No, it doesn't. No, my drinking water comes from a mysterious river that starts in Connecticut, goes under the Long Island Sound and pops up on Long Island. No, it doesn't. 100% of the drinking water comes from underground in an aquifer system. You can see the layers there. You can see right here, the vast majority of the public drink from the Magothy aquifer. That's actually the middle layer. And since we all live, that's 3 million people on Long Island on top of this aquifer system, it means everything we do on the surface seeps down underground. So what could possibly go wrong? Well, funny you should ask. Next slide. Actually, a lot goes wrong. Nancy in Westchester, they want to upgrade sewage treatment plants, as they should. Their sewage treatment plants need a lot of help. We want to get to the stage in Suffolk where we actually have sewage treatment plants. Suffolk County is known widely as the septic capital of the world. This is not a claim to fame we want. We don't want to use it on our tourism industry brochures, but we have 360,000 homes in Suffolk County that have septics. And that means that a lot of nitrogen is leaching out into that groundwater and going into the Long Island Sound and all our other water bodies and freshwater bodies as well. So it's lakes, streams, rivers, and the 3 estuary systems that touch Long Island. Next. You can see studies show that nitrogen has been climbing in both the glacial aquifer, which is the top level. Okay, so Francine's got a quick finger there. And the second level, which is the Magothy. In 2005, a 200% increase in nitrogen levels was documented. Next, Dr. Chris Gobler from Stony Brook University has been putting out this, in combination with the Nature Conservancy, has been putting out this wonderful map. This is from 2021. Just want to point to you. You can see the blue is where hypoxia is. Brown is brown tide. Mahogany is mahogany tide. The blue-green is blue-green algae. You get the point. There's rust tide, mahogany tide, blue-green algae, low hypoxia. Now we have a new one called pink tide. It's a lovely shade of pink. We're just so excited about it. So we have a rainbow of what's called Hobbs harmful algal blooms. The reason I'm telling you this, it's all related to our septic systems. The more we leach into the groundwater, the more groundwater is going into the open water, the more nitrogen. What loves nitrogen? Plants. Plants love nitrogen. So it creates more and more harmful algal blooms. So this is 2021. Next. This is 2022. Next. This is 2023. So as you can see, it's not getting better on its own. This is not a problem that will solve itself. I know that this will shock many of you, but here in 2024, we need to actually treat our sewage. We cannot just let it combine with our groundwater, which is also our drinking water, and flow out into our bays and harbors and estuaries. We can't do that anymore. Tomorrow, Dr. Gobler will be releasing the 2024 map. Guess what it's going to show? That the problem continues and persists. Next. Well, you can go. Well, I just want to mention this one, red tide, because this was Northport, unfortunately, and again, not a claim to fame we want, was the epicenter of red tide for all of America. It had like 1 million cells per liter. It was very bad. But we upgraded the Northport sewage treatment plant, and that has really reduced the incidences a great deal. But red tide is no joke. It's what's called a saxotoxin, which means it builds up in shellfish. And if you eat those shellfish, you will get saxotoxin poisoning, which leads to paralysis or death. We have an incident a couple of years ago in Alaska. 7 people died from red tide or PSP poisoning. And it's really no joke. And we really worked hard to address that quickly and effectively. Keep going. Blue-green algae, as someone said earlier, this is for our lakes. It's a freshwater algae. And again, no joke. It attacks the liver and causes liver failure. So whether you see it in Lake Ronkonkoma or other freshwater bodies, we know for a fact that animals have gone into these freshwater bodies and died not 6 months later, hours later. Next. In fact, the New York Times did a very large story about a year ago, and that was that pets across America were going into polluted freshwater bodies and coming out and literally dying within an hour to 2 hours. We had one such incidents here in Suffolk County, out east in the town of Southampton, that like that. Next. Okay, we're not going to go through all the different colored tides. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Here's what I want to tell you. We have a serious situation. The nitrogen overload causes wetlands to become weak. A lot of people don't know this, but wetlands are supposed to have deep roots. They dig down deep. And then when the storm surge comes, heavy winds, rising sea levels, the wetlands absorb those wave actions, absorb the storm surges, and protect the mainland. But when the roots are very shallow, because there's plenty of nitrogen right now in the surface water, wetlands fracture and break during waves and strong tides and storms. That does not protect the mainland and causes, in fact, more flooding and more flood damage. So that is one more incredibly important reason to eliminate nitrogen from our surface waters. How are we going to do it? Well, happy you asked. Next. On the ballot, keep going. Here we are. Okay, Suffolk County referendum. It's called Proposition 2. Everybody who lives in Suffolk County is going to ask to be part of the solution. We're asking people on Proposition 2 this November, flip your ballot over, and Prop 2 will say, do you agree that you want to increase your sales tax 1/8 of 1 penny? And that money would go into a fund to do 2 and only 2 things. One is to expand sewer infrastructure where appropriate and where needed, also upgrade some existing sewer infrastructure. And the second thing would be to continue to fund the county's program to change septic and cesspool systems out and put in new what's called IA systems, which actually treat for nitrogen and treat the sewage in each individual home. To give you some reference, what is 1/8 of 1 penny? Well, if you spend $500, it's 60 cents. If you spend $1,000, it's $1.20. That's what it is. Next. So this is the exact language. Extend and revise the drinking water protection program and create a 1/8% sales tax and user tax to modernize Suffolk County sewers and septic systems to improve the quality of surface and groundwater. Once in a generation chance to fix our water issue. And I just want to tell you guys, there's no plan B. This is it. This is the plan. It's the only plan. It's based on 10 years of good science, a good plan, and a good program. So we're really hoping that we need people to go to the ballot and vote on Proposition 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrienne. Oh, just lost my chat. Thank you very much, Adrienne. All right, so we are going to get to some of these great questions that have been asked. I'm going to try to spread them around. Paul, I saw one for me too, but I'm going to get to our main speakers first. So first up, we have this one, I think is Nancy, but other people could jump in. Nancy, have the number of cesspools, septic systems, and sewer connected residences been identified in Westchester? So is there kind of a complete map of where the on-site is, where the sanitary sewered areas are?
Yes, there definitely is. There are such maps, and each municipality knows. I can tell you in the unincorporated town of Mamaroneck, there are 88 households that are not on the sewage, on the municipal sewer. They have their own septic system. So we know that in the sewered areas, it's very few households. And in the northern part of the county, it's primarily unsewered. And that area also has groundwater issues that they're concerned about. And it, depending on where they are, those properties, you know, are in the watershed of either Long Island Sound or the Hudson River or the New York City drinking watershed.
Thanks, Nancy. Not quite the 300,000 that Adrian was talking about, but good to know that they're being mapped. And, you know, maybe as part of the consolidation, there'll be one map, right? Not just each
That's what we're hoping.
village
Yeah.
or each spot has their own little map where an engineer knows where things are. Thank you, Nancy. And the next one's actually one that you asked, which I think Alicia could address. Do we have the same impervious change maps for New York? So Alicia, you showed some really great percentage increase, decrease maps for Connecticut that I think Clear had generated. Do we have something similar for New York?
I think that someone had posted, I don't know the answer to that, but I think someone did post a Long
Yeah.
Island Sound land cover viewer
Tim
in
Munter
the chat.
at
Yeah.
Connecticut.
Tim, could you
Yeah.
jump in? Does it do the same thing where it's showing percent increase, decrease throughout the watershed? Is that what that is going to show?
It does, but it's only for the Long Island Sound watershed. So other parts of New York, other parts of Long Island won't show those percent changes.
Got it. Thank you. Thanks for dropping it in the chat too. I was actually curious about that myself. I've been using Clear's impervious surface maps they did do for New York, which I know they haven't continued to do. So that's good to know that it exists. Okay, here's a longer one from Dana. How do we affect, influence, educate our local town zoning board to quit giving variance permissions for development in wetlands and riparian buffer areas, overstepping intended regulations, and putting in impervious surfaces with such development? There seems to be a lack of education on the consequences. I'm going to zip forward a little bit. Even when flooding is already occurring in these associated areas. Can we set up a system to educate Connecticut town zoning boards how to better protect their, you know, riparian buffers, wetlands, and water courses? I serving on a wetland agency in Connecticut, I have a comment on that one, but I think it's to you. So why don't you go first, Alicia, please?
Sure, and definitely, Peter, jump in. I that on the ground experience is important. So what I will say is, first of all, our agency needs to invest more in supporting our local inland wetlands agencies. Right now, there are 0 staff fully dedicated to the inland wetlands program in Connecticut. We had tried to pass a bill to have all inland wetlands commissioners trained the last 2 sessions. It will be back. We need to get that passed. DEP needs to invest more into advanced training for inland wetlands. And, you know, I have often believed that there needs to be some sort of audit at the state level of our inland wetlands agencies. And to see, you know, but on the other side, in some cases, because of our case law, you know, over the years since the Inland Wetlands Act was established in 1984, I think, there are a lot of inland wetlands agencies that know exactly what should happen, but feel they can't because they feel they're going to get sued. And that's why it's really, really, and I was focusing on riparian buffers here, but what needs to happen is there needs to be we need to give all of our agents, land use commissions, whether it be planning and zoning or inland wetlands, the ability to assess for vulnerability for downstream, downslope residents, properties, water bodies. They have to be given those tools. And so we have to incorporate climate change more solidly into our Planning and Zoning and Inland Wetlands Act. And Peter, I'll let you talk about your personal experience.
I mean, I think you really covered it well. I was going to add something, and you actually mentioned it. It's the empowerment of these zoning officials. I mean, I happen to be on the Town of Greenwich agency, which I like to think of, and I've heard reference, not just me, as the New York Yankees of wetland agencies, and I'm really honored to be on that commission, and I've done the trainings and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, we have a really fully fleshed out IWWA. That's the acronym for these agencies. There's some towns in Connecticut with one representative that has volunteer commissioners that haven't taken the training, and that sense of, can we enforce our own regulations? Like, I actually come face to face with that, and the answer is yes, you need to. And it's just giving those people the empowerment to feel, yes, we can enforce our municipal regulations. So that was actually just the part that I was going to say, but you already mentioned it, so I should stop blabbing. Thank you for that answer. I think it was really pretty comprehensive.
And I will say that those changes are not going to be easy at the state level, and it's going to need a lot of support from a lot of people, because there are a lot of moneyed interests that actually want to walk back on a lot of our inland wetlands protections. So
yeah, which is a shame, because I mean, wetlands being so incredibly important, and you think about Connecticut's wetlands and our watercourse, just our state statutes are fairly protective, you know, when you compare to some neighboring states, they're very protective, you know, and if they're enforced, they really are putting us in a good spot to save what we can. You know, wetlands have been lost at a remarkable rate prior to some of these regulations, and we really need to step up and make sure that they're enforced. Okay. So thank you for that, Alicia. Paul, you had a question, but before you answer that, Nancy, I had one for you. In terms of consolidation, I think there are some examples in neighboring counties. Can you speak to that a little bit, please?
Yes, we know that Onondaga County in New York has a consolidated system, so we're looking to that. And we know that Suffolk has been working on it for a while, and we know Nassau has a consolidated system. So yes, we're absolutely looking at them as role models and looking to them for the process.
Yeah, I've been to the one, some of the plant in Nassau, and I remember a lot in the discussion how things were coming up as we treat this as an asset, and not to put the words in the villages and towns' mouths, but I do see sometimes I think it's a burden, right? So if the focus could be shifted to our wastewater treatment plant is an asset and the underground infrastructure are assets, I think it changes people's perspective on how it's managed, and then it leads to very likely cleaner water down the line. Paul, you had one for me on the report card, and I wanted to get to it last but not least. Yeah, there's some great news. I encourage people to read the 2024 Long Island Sound report card. 98% of the open waters, very important distinction, are getting a B or better. There's still, frankly, a pretty big F in the Western Narrows. And this is related, Paul, if you didn't see this question, excuse me. The 2024 Long Island Sound report card looks great. Do we really need further nitrogen reduction, or how much do we need? I think was the specific question. You know, when we look at the open waters, the Eastern Narrows, the Western Narrows, which are the westernmost portion of the Sound, even the Western Basin, they have poor dissolved oxygen. Adrian was showing that in those hypoxia maps that Dr. Gobler put out as well. I mean, we see low dissolved oxygen in those sections of the Sound still. And Paul, to answer your question, I think it should certainly be part of the discussion, right? Do we need to readdress the equalized nitrogen program that the Long Island Sound study put in place with the nitrogen total maximum daily load? You know, looking at the wastewater treatment plants in those specific areas that are still struggling in terms of ecological health. We can't lose the fact that many of the open waters have statistically gotten better, though. So it's kind of a good and more challenging news. But 42% of the bays and harbors, and there were 57, graded in the report card, got a C, D, or F. And that really speaks to the next focus on nitrogen pollution reduction, which is bays, the margins, right? The bays, the harbors, the inlets. You heard Adrian, you heard all our speakers really reference it. There's lots of bays and harbors still struggling around the Sound from nitrogen pollution. And, you know, each bay has its own makeup of where those sources are. And Adrian was talking about cesspools, and I actually have a question for you, Adrian, so I'm going to shut up in a second. But, you know, replacing those cesspools, reducing impervious coverages, getting back to natural ecological state, and as much as we can as a natural kind of treatment of nitrogen in the land surrounding the waters, those all go a long way for each bay and harbor in different ratios. Adrian, that made me think, for cesspools, you were talking about innovative alternative systems and how many need to be put in place, right? Where these aging holes in the ground, essentially, where waste is going. I've heard some percentages in terms of how much better they are at removing nitrogen in Gobler's work. Do you have those on hand?
Yeah, they're actually amazingly better. So for instance, in Suffolk County, they're only allowing the new IAs to be put into the ground if they're achieving the goal of 17 milligrams per liter or less of nitrogen. And when you compare that to an old cesspool or septic, which is anywhere between 60 and 90 or maybe more, it's a lot less. And some of the new technologies for these IAs are even getting less than 19. I know Stony Brook University is piloting one. They just got permit from the county to pilot it in Suffolk County, and it's getting less than 10 parts per milliliter. So it's amazing the job
Staggering,
that they
really, right?
do, and it's dramatically different.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and I've heard some of the 80+% better than just the hole in the ground,
There you
which
go.
is that's
Yep.
going to be huge, right?
Yeah.
I noticed a couple more questions came in. Paul, lawn fertilizer? Absolutely. Too many regions of the Long Island Sound watershed have, frankly, a fertilizer addiction. Adrian referenced the North Shore. Fairfield County, though, and Westchester County have some of the highest fertilizer application rates in the whole coastal watershed. And that really needs to be curbed. I mean,
Peter,
people need to be right about it. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to make sure you note that the survey link we're up at time. So
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll zip it. But fertilizer is definitely a leading issue for many
For
baby
sure.
boomers. So yeah, if people could please take a moment to respond to the survey that Melissa put in the chat. We really would appreciate the guidance. We're going to be having a Coastal Watershed Network Summit in March. Hope many of you will attend, and we're looking for some input and direction from this group on what you'd like to hear about, what kind of things and topics and speakers you'd like to see. And I also have to give, if you don't mind, a quick pitch. People can leave. I know it's 2:30. We're going to be having, we're speaking report card, a Long Island Sound report card webinar on November 29th at 12:30 that I'd encourage people to also attend if you want to hear me and others talk more about the report card. But wrapping up today, thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for your questions. Please take a moment to fill out the survey, and hope to see all of you and maybe some of your friends in March.
And we will be sending out links to the recording, and we'll answer any of the questions we didn't get to in the chat. So thank you, as always, for your attendance.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.